Hello and welcome. Today you and I are going to be reading the second part of The Well by W. W. Jacobs. We got past the horrible argument Jem Benson and Wilfred Carr were having, and now The Well has made its first appearance. In case you need a refresher, William Waymark Jacobs was an English author born in 1863 who is best known for his short story, The Monkey's Paw. This story has been adapted multiple times and in numerous formats, including a 2004 radio adaptation read by Christopher Lee. It's very interesting. Go find it. It's quite well done. So, now, let's get into the story. We've reached the often talked about well. So, let's see how it figures into this little tale, shall we?
Two people walking slowly around the park in the fragrant stillness of a summer evening strayed in the direction of the well. "No use going through this wilderness, Olive," said Benson, pausing on the outskirts of the pines and eyeing with some disfavor the gloom beyond. "Best part of the park," said the girl briskly. "You know it's my favorite spot." "I know you're very fond of sitting on the coping," said the man slowly, "and I wish you wouldn't. One day you will lean back too far and fall in." "And make the acquaintance of truth," said Olive lightly.
She ran from him and was lost in the shadow of the pines, the bracken crackling beneath her feet as she ran.
Her companion followed slowly, and emerging from the gloom saw her poised daintily on the edge of the well, with her feet hidden in the rank grass and nettles which surrounded it. She motioned her companion to take a seat by her side, and smiled softly as she felt a strong arm passed about her waist. "I like this place," said she, breaking a long silence. "It is so dismal, so uncanny. Do you know, I wouldn't dare to sit here alone, Jem. I should imagine that all sorts of dreadful things were hidden behind the bushes and trees, waiting to spring out on me. Ugh!" "You'd better let me take you in," said her companion tenderly. "The well isn't always wholesome, especially in the hot weather. Let's make a move." The girl gave an obstinate little shake and settled herself more securely on her seat. "Smoke your cigar in peace," she said quietly. "I am settled here for a quiet talk. Has anything been heard of Wilfred yet?" "Nothing." "Quite a dramatic disappearance, isn't it?" she continued. "Another scrape, I suppose, and another letter for you in the same old strain. 'Dear Jem, help me out.'" Jem Benson blew a cloud of fragrant smoke into the air, and holding his cigar between his teeth, brushed away the ash from his coat sleeves. "I wonder what he would have done without you," said the girl, pressing his arm affectionately. "Gone under long ago, I suppose. When we are married, Jem, I shall presume upon the relationship to lecture him. He is very wild, but he has his good points, poor fellow." "I never saw him," said Benson, with startling bitterness. "God knows I never saw him." "He is nobody's enemy but his own," said the girl, startled by this outburst. "You don't know much about him," said the other sharply. "He was not above blackmail, not above ruining the life of a friend to do himself a benefit. A loafer, a cur, and a liar." The girl looked up at him soberly but timidly, and took his arm without a word, and they both sat silent while evening deepened into night, and the beams of the moon, filtering through the branches, surrounded them with a silver network. Her head sank upon his shoulder, till suddenly, with a sharp cry, she sprang to her feet. "What was that?" she cried breathlessly. "What was what?" demanded Benson, springing up and clutching her fast by the arm. She caught her breath and tried to laugh. "You're hurting me, Jem." His hold relaxed. "What is the matter?" he asked gently. "What was it startled you?" "I was startled," she said slowly, putting her hands on his shoulder. I suppose the words I used just now are ringing in my ears. But I fancy that somebody behind us whispered, 'Jem, help me out.'" "Fancy," replied Benson, and his voice shook. "But these fancies are no good for you. You are frightened at the dark and the gloom of these trees. Let me take you back to the house." "No, I'm not frightened," said the girl, reseating herself. "I should never be really frightened of anything when you were with me, Jem. I'm surprised at myself for being so silly." The man made no reply, but stood, a strong, dark figure, a yard or two from the well, as though waiting for her to join him. "Come and sit down, sir," cried Olive, patting the brickwork with her small white hand. "One would think that you did not like your company." He obeyed, slowly, and took a seat by her side, drawing so hard at his cigar that the light of it shone upon his fare at every breath. He passed his arm, firm and rigid as steel, behind her, with his hand resting on the brickwork beyond. "Are you warm enough?" he asked tenderly, as she made a little movement. "Pretty fair," she shivered. "One oughtn't to be cold at this time of year, but there's a cold, damp air comes up from the well." As she spoke, a faint splash sounded from the depths below, and for the second time that evening she sprang from the well with a little cry of dismay. "What is it now?" he asked in a fearful voice. He stood by her side and gazed at the well, as though half expecting to see the cause of her alarm emerge from it. "Oh, my bracelet!" she cried in distress. "My poor mother's bracelet! I've dropped it down the well."
"Your bracelet?"
replied Benson dully. "Your bracelet? The diamond one?" "The one that was my mother's," said Olive. "Oh, we can get it back surely. We must have the water drained off." "Your bracelet," replied Benson stupidly. "Jem!" said the girl in terrified tones. "Dear Jem, what is the matter?" For the man she loved was standing regarding her with horror. The moon which touched it was not responsible for all the whiteness of the distorted face, and she shrank back in fear to the edge of the well. He saw her fear, and by a mighty effort regained his composure and took her hand. "Poor little girl," he murmured.
"You frightened me. I was not looking when you cried, and I thought you were slipping from my arms. Down, down."
His voice broke, and the girl, throwing herself into his arms, clung to him convulsively. "There, there," said Benson fondly. "Don't cry, don't cry." "Tomorrow," said Olive, half crying, half laughing, "we will all come around the well with a hook and a line and fish for it. It will be quite a new sport." "No, we must try some other way," said Benson. "You shall have it back." "How?" asked the girl. "You shall see," said Benson. "Tomorrow morning at latest you shall have it back. Till then, promise me that you will not mention your loss to anyone. Promise?" "I promise," said Olive wonderingly. "But why not?"
"It is of great value for one thing, and... But there are many reasons. For one, it is my duty to get it for you."
"Wouldn't you like to jump down for it?" she said mischievously. "Listen." She stooped for a stone and dropped it down. "Fancy being where that is now," she said, peering into the blackness. "Fancy going round and round like a mouse in a pail, clutching at the slimy sides with the water filling your mouth, and looking up to the little patch of sky above." "You'd better come in," said Benson, very quietly. "You are developing a taste for the morbid and horrible." The girl turned, and taking his arm, walked slowly in the direction of the house. Mrs. Benson, who was sitting in the porch, rose to receive them. "You shouldn't have kept her out so long," she said chidingly. "Where have you been?" "Sitting on the well," said Olive, smiling, "discussing our future." "I don't believe that place is healthy," said Mrs. Benson emphatically. "I really think it might be filled in, Jem." "All right," said her son slowly. "Pity it wasn't filled in long ago." He took the chair vacated by his mother as she entered the house with Olive, and with his hands hanging limply over the sides, sat in deep thought. After a time he rose, and going upstairs to a room which was set apart for sporting requisites, selected a sea-fishing line and some hooks, and stole softly downstairs again. He walked swiftly across the park in the direction of the well, turning before he entered the shadow of the trees to look back at the lighted windows of the house.
Then, having arranged his line, he sat on the edge of the well and cautiously lowered it.
He sat with his lips compressed, occasionally looking about him in a startled fashion, as though he half expected to see something peering at him from the belt of trees. Time after time he lowered his line until at length, in pulling it up, he heard a little metallic tinkle against the side of the well. He held his breath then, and forgetting his fears, drew the line in inch by inch, so as to not lose its precious burden. His pulse beat rapidly, and his eyes were bright. As the line came slowly in, he saw the catch hanging to the hook, and with a steady hand drew the last few feet in. Then he saw that instead of the bracelet he had hooked a bunch of keys. With a faint cry he shook them from the hook into the water below and stood breathing heavily. Not a sound broke the stillness of the night. He walked up and down a bit and stretched his great muscles. Then he came back to the well and resumed his task. For an hour or more the line was lowered without result. In his eagerness he forgot his fears, and with eyes bent down the well, fished slowly and carefully. Twice the hook became entangled in something, and was with great difficulty released. It caught a third time, and all his efforts failed to free it. Then he dropped the line down the well, and with head bent, walked toward the house. He went first to the stables at the rear, and then retiring to his room for some time, paced restlessly up and down. Then, without removing his clothes, he flung himself upon the bed, and fell into a troubled sleep. Long before anybody else was astir, he arose and stole softly downstairs. The sunlight was stealing in at every crevice, and flashing in long streaks across the darkened rooms. The dining room, into which he looked, struck chill and cheerless in the dark yellow light, which came through the lowered blinds. He remembered that it had the same appearance when his father lay dead in the house. Now, as then, everything seemed ghastly and unreal. The very chairs standing as their occupants had left them the night before seemed to be indulging in some dark communication of ideas. Slowly and noiselessly he opened the hall door and passed into the fragrant air beyond. The sun was shining on the drenched grass and trees, and a slowly vanishing white mist rolled like smoke about the grounds. For a moment he stood, breathing deeply the sweet air of the morning, and then walked slowly in the direction of the stables. The rusty creaking of a pump handle and the spatter of water upon the red-tiled courtyard showed that somebody else was astir, and a few steps farther he beheld a brawny, sandy-haired man gasping wildly under severe self-affliction at the pump. "Everything ready, George?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," said the man, straightening up suddenly and touching his forehead. "Bob's just finishing up the arrangements inside. It's a lovely morning for a dip. The water in that well must be just icy." "Be as quick as you can," said Benson impatiently. "Very good, sir," said George, burnishing his face harshly with a very small towel, which had been hanging over the side of the pump. "Hurry up, Bob." In answer to his summons, a man appeared at the door of the stable with a coil of stout rope over his arm and a large metal candlestick in his hand. "Just to try the air, sir," said George, following his master's glance. "A well gets rather foul sometimes, but if a candle can live down it, a man can." His master nodded, and the man, hastily pulling up the neck of his shirt and thrusting his arms into his coat, followed him as he led the way slowly to the well. "Beg pardon, sir," said George, drawing up to his side, "but you are not looking over and above well this morning. If you let me go down, I'd enjoy the bath." "No, no," said Benson, peremptorily. "You ain't fit to go down, sir," persisted his follower. "I've never seen you look so before. Now, mind your business," said his master, curtly. George became silent, and the three walked with swinging strides through the long wet grass to the well. Bob flung the rope on the ground, and at a sign from his master handed him the candlestick. "Here's the line for it, sir," said Bob, fumbling in his pockets. Benson took it from him and slowly tied it to the candlestick. Then he placed it on the edge of the well and, striking a match, lit the candle and began slowly to lower it. "Hold hard, sir," said George quickly, laying his hand on his arm. "You must tilt it or the string will burn through." Even as he spoke, the string parted, and the candlestick fell into the water below. Benson swore quietly. "I'll soon get another," said George, starting up. "Never mind, the well's all right," said Benson. "It won't take a moment, sir," said the other over his shoulder. "Are you master here, or am I?" said Benson hoarsely. George came back slowly, a glance at his master's face stopping the protest upon his tongue, and he stood by watching him sulkily as he sat on the well and removed his outer garments. Both men watched him curiously, as having completed his preparations he stood grim and silent with his hands by his sides. "I wish you'd let me go, sir," said George, plucking up courage to address him. "You ain't fit to go. You've got a chill or something. I shouldn't wonder it's the typhoid. They've got it in the village bad." For a moment Benson looked at him angrily. Then his gaze softened. "Not this time, George," he said quietly. He took the looped end of the rope and placed it under his arms, and sitting down threw one leg over the side of the well. "How are you going about it, sir?" queried George, laying hold of the rope and signing to Bob to do the same. "I'll call out when I reach the water," said Benson. "Then pay out 3 yards more quickly so that I can get to the bottom." "Very good, sir," answered both. Their master threw the other leg over the coping and sat motionless. His back was turned toward the men as he sat with head bent, looking down the shaft. He sat for so long that George became uneasy. "All right, sir?" he inquired. "Yes," said Benson slowly. "If I tug at the rope, George, pull up at once. Lower away." The rope passed steadily through their hands until a hollow cry from the darkness below and a faint splashing warned them that he had reached the water. They gave him 3 yards more and stood with relaxed grasp and strained ears, waiting. "He's gone under," said Bob in a low voice. The other nodded, and moistening his huge palms, took a firmer grip of the rope. Fully a minute passed, and the men began to exchange uneasy glances. Then a sudden, tremendous jerk, followed by a series of feebler ones, nearly tore the rope from their grasp. "Pull!" shouted George, placing one foot on the side and hauling desperately. "Pull! Pull! He's stuck fast! He's not coming! Pull!" In response to their terrific exertions, the rope came slowly in, inch by inch, until at length a violent splashing was heard, and at the same moment a scream of unutterable horror came echoing up the shaft. "What a weight he is!" panted Bob. "He's stuck fast or something. Keep still, sir, for heaven's sake, keep still!" For the taut rope was being jerked violently by the struggles of the weight at the end of it. Both men, with grunts and sighs, hauled it in foot by foot. "All right, sir," cried George cheerfully. He had one foot against the well and was pulling manfully. The burden was nearing the top. A long pull and a strong pull, and the face of a dead man with mud in his eyes and nostrils came peering over the edge. Behind it was the ghastly face of his master. But this he saw too late, for with a great cry he let go his hold of the rope and stepped back. The suddenness overthrew his assistant, and the rope tore through his hands. There was a frightful splash. "You fool!" stammered Bob, and ran to the well helplessly. "Run!" cried George. "Run for another line!" He bent over the coping and called eagerly down as his assistant sped back to the stables, shouting wildly. His voice re-echoed down the shaft, but all else was silence.
Was that the ghost of a vengeful Wilford Carr? Or did Benson simply panic and get tangled up with his waterlogged victim? The story ends right here, so we don't know. But the suspense and build up to this climax is just wonderful. I've really enjoyed reading this story, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. So, this book is available in the public domain, and you can find it on Project Gutenberg. I hope you'll join us next time for our other story times. And it is a bit of a rainy day here, so keep safe and dry, and I'll see you next time.